Welcome, Jordon, to the Thinkers 50 Business World interaction today. In fact, guest today we have Jordon Kassalow with us, who's the founder and co-chair for VisionSpring. VisionSpring is one of the smartest, from my point of view, optical companies or spectacle manufacturing company and distribution company. Jordon, welcome, and thanks a lot for giving your time.
It's my privilege.
Thank you. So, Jordon, starting the conversation, could you just tell me something more about the VisionSpring idea? As to how did it really come about, and how do you think you're really making an impact through this?
It came about from personal experience. As a doctor of optometry, I've worked in over 40 countries, taking care of all types of vision problems, from cataracts to river blindness to spectacle, lack of spectacles. And I saw that for every person who had a medical problem with their eyes, there were 10 people who just needed spectacles. And it became particularly compelling when I realized that half the people who needed glasses were people who were earning their living with their eyes and hands, weavers, tailors, artisans, and so forth, who were falling out of the workforce, not because of some terrible disease, but just because they couldn't see up close and just needed a pair of glasses that I knew I could source in China for less than $1. I thought it was a ridiculous state of affairs, and I'm trying to change that.
Quite interesting. So what you're saying is that you have actually made a very interesting impact in the world by way of really understanding the market per se, the problem per se. And you said like there are about 10 people who do not really understand that they have a problem as well when they're looking at things or working and things. Could you give me an example of that sort, or how do you think has been the social impact that you have actually created?
Though there's a very powerful link between vision and economic development. And as we know, economic development is a major problem in this world, and we're trying to find ways to bring more and more people into the mainstream of the world economy. And income disparity is a major problem. And vision feeds that income disparity in several ways. One is for kids, if they can't see, they can't learn. And huge numbers of kids throughout the world fall out of school, again, not because of any incapacity to learn, but just because they can't see the blackboard. So that's one impact that we're having. We're enabling kids to see to learn. The second is the link between vision and productivity. If you can't see, you can't work. And we've done some studies that show that when people get our glasses, their productivity increases by 35% and their income by 20%. And the third link between vision and economic development is safety. Road traffic fatalities are one of the larger or leading causes of fatality in the developing world. 59% of road traffic fatalities have a visual component associated with them. And so we're working to make sure that people increasingly who are driving have access to affordable glasses. So personal security and safety is another area that we're focusing on.
As of today, how many lives do you think you've touched across the world?
Directly, we are closing in on our 2 millionth customer. And as you can imagine, we touch more lives than just those 2 million people in the very simple way as follows. If you're a 43-year-old weaver or tailor and you fall out of the workforce, it doesn't just impact you personally. It's happening at a time when you're at the economic center of your community, supporting children on one side and elderly parents on the other. So if you take that weaver or tailor out of the workforce, it has a terrible ripple effect, not only on that person, but across the family and across the village. And so we probably, can say that we affect 5 times more people than we've sold glasses to, because the average family size is probably about 5 people in the markets where we work.
So that's a huge impact. And have you ever tried to calculate the economic impact that you've actually created? Because in terms of lives, one thing is very clear that you're talking about 10 million people. Yep. That's huge. But in terms of economic value, if I really try to put it as an economic term.
Yes, we have. We've done this study with the University of Michigan to show that the average person, once they get our glasses, have an increase of productivity by 35%. And that translates to, in the markets where we work, where the average person or average customer makes $2 a day, that translates to $108 of economic value per pair of glasses per year. And we calculate that our glasses last on average 2 years, although that's kind of conservative. And so for each pair of glasses that we sell for $2, $3, that yields a $216 return on investment, and so that's a huge impact economically. And we've sold, let's say, 2 million pair of glasses, and you multiply that by 216. So as an organization, we're getting to a place where we're increasing economic impact of about almost $500 million over the last 10 years.
Exceptional, Jordon. But then what you're saying is so powerful, and how did you come to this idea? Because this problem always existed in the world, that there were people who were always facing the issue of not being able to read, write, or whatever, because of lack of vision, or not being able to work properly. How did you find this idea? How did you actually hit that nail on the head that, okay, this is one problem that you would like to solve?
It had to do with, as a student, I became involved with an organization that brought eye care services to underserved populations. And the transformative moment that I had was that my very first patient was a 7-year-old boy from the School for the Blind. And when I examined his eyes, we recognized that he wasn't actually blind. He was just profoundly nearsighted. And we found a pair of glasses that we brought 5,000 pair of glasses categorized by strength. And we had a pair of glasses that was quite close to his prescription, which was a -20, so very, very high. And I was the lucky person who put the glasses on that boy's face. And when the lenses aligned with his eyes, this blank stare of a blind child just transformed into this incredible smile of joy. And for me, I had given him his vision, but equally he gave me my purpose that day. And from that really literally moment on, I've been on this quest to solve this problem, because I just felt that there was so much inequity of having a child like that whose life was in front of him and he had no hope, he had no purpose in his life. And just that one pair of glasses literally transformed that boy's life.
And when you were going through this creation of VisionSpring, I'm sure you must have hit a lot of hurdles in terms of creating this business, in terms of creating this business model. Could you just tell me more about the hurdles that you had actually hit? What was the first biggest challenge that you actually faced?
Well, the first challenge that we faced was we needed to figure out a business model to solve this problem. So the problem we recognized was that 700 million people in the world needed a pair of affordable glasses. Half the people who needed glasses just needed the simple glasses that in the United States and increasingly in India, you could just buy at a store, at a pharmacy or at a grocery store, the +1, +2, +3 glasses. And so we started trying to solve that problem. And we put two needs together. One was the fact that, as we described earlier, the Weaver and Taylor were falling out of the workforce. And so they needed that product. But what I also observed in working in communities all over the world was that there was a huge amount of people who were underemployed or unemployed, and they needed an economic opportunity. So I thought, well, why couldn't we just train local men and women, particularly women, to sell simple glasses to their neighbors, creating a livelihood for the woman and sustaining a livelihood of the skilled craftsperson. And so that was our first model. We called it our 1.0 model, and we created a man force called the Vision Entrepreneur. And we kind of became the darling of the social enterprise world. People loved the idea. It was so elegant. We were creating jobs, sustaining jobs through such a simple health product, and giving such value to people. And we worked on that model for about 5 years. The good news was that we were getting a lot of attention and we were getting a lot of glasses on people's noses. The bad news was, no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't get that model to yield enough money to cover our operating expenses. So that was our first big hurdle. We were known for this incredibly innovative model. We had gotten a lot of funding for it. We had gotten a lot of recognition for it. But at the end of the day, it didn't really work as a business. And that's when we started having to iterate.
Why do you think it didn't work at that point in time? Because, in fact, I've heard you saying that the first business model is never going to be successful. Right. You'll have to do about multiple iterations, about 4 to 8 iterations before you actually hit the nail on the head.
Right.
So how did you really resolve this problem? And was there a journey of doing multiple iterations to really find that sweet spot that you're actually right now in?
Yeah, there's clearly a journey, and it's been an interesting one. The reason the model didn't work was multifold. One was that there was there wasn't a market for our glasses. So there was a latent demand, meaning that physiologically people needed our glasses, but the demand was latent. People didn't know they needed their glasses. So to create a demand is expensive. So that's one thing that it was expensive to create the demand. Other thing was that the people who we were serving, by definition, given our social mission, had very little capacity to pay. So it was expensive to create demand, but we couldn't yield too much margin because we had to make the glasses very inexpensive. We were also a one-product company, and so we couldn't distribute our earnings through a multiple number of products, and so we had just only one product, and that small basket of goods was limiting for us. And then the people who we were targeting tended to be, again, the poor people in the rural areas, so our distribution costs were also high. So we had a very high cost structure to reach our audience, to wake up the awareness, to reach them physically. Their capacity to pay was low. We only had one product. The sales force was expensive to train because we had a direct sales force channel rather than a multi-line independent sales force channel. So there were a lot of components to our model that were nice and they were they were elegant, but from a business perspective, it ended up just being too expensive.
How did you start resolving these issues? Because when you say that it was too expensive, and I'm sure you're starting with the cost of a glasses or a pair of glasses, because typically a lot of us would believe that a pair of glasses would be about $50, or maybe at least in the Indian context it'll be about $6 or $7. But you were able to actually just change the very paradigm in terms of like how glasses were seen, or how the price point for glasses were seen. So how did you actually hit that sweet spot again to really bring the cost lower?
So the cost was a big component to it, and that's true for any social business, true for any business, that pricing is such a key component, and trying to find that pricing was right. So initially our price for our glasses was around 180 rupees. And over time, because we saw that although we were able to get some market penetration in that 180 rupee area, there was still not a huge take-up for it, because it was still too expensive for the average person who earns 75 cents to $3, which is sort of where our consumer is in India. And so we were forced then to go back to the manufacturer floor in China and say, how can we retain the value, but make the costs significantly less? And so we started a program called our Radical Affordability Program, where we looked at every component of the glass with our manufacturers in China and stripped out every possible cost that we could. And over time, that enabled us to lower our cost of goods by about 50%. And that's helped us now come back into the market with a product that costs about 100 rupees, and even some as low as $1. And so we have been able to get the price much lower, and that's helped with the uptake considerably.
So it's again very simply put, from a business perspective, it was economies of scale that you were able to achieve in terms of the number of glasses that you were actually making every single day or in one single order in China.
Right.
But I'm sure you were actually hit by another problem, and that was about distribution. And I'm sure that must have been one of your largest challenges or biggest challenges in the country. How did you overcome that challenge of distribution?
So distribution is very much a challenge. You know, a lot of businesses have, at least in the US, they have a distribution problem, but at least the market has been created, so they just have to work on the distribution. We had to work on creating the market and the distribution at the same time in an under-resourced environment, which is why, again, social enterprises are so challenged, because they've got to often do both, and each one independently is hard enough. And so in terms of distribution, we morphed our distribution from that direct sales force vision entrepreneur model to two models. One we call our hub and spoke model, where we create low-cost retail environments where people can come into our optical store and get glasses. But from each retail hub, we also have what we call our outreach channel. So we have from each hub a van going out into the communities around the hub area, and there they raise awareness. They sell the simple reading glasses, they sell sunglasses, and they raise awareness as well as take care of the simplest problems at the village level, and case find and return patients to our hub. And so that's what we call the hub and spoke strategy. Other people like to call it the lens crafters meets Mary Kay model. And so that's one way in which we have worked on distribution. A lot of our hubs are now based in eye hospitals. And the eye hospitals like us because they tend to be very passionate about providing cataract surgery, but they're not so passionate about glasses. And so we can do that better than them. And then the other thing that they like about us is as we do our outreach, not only are we finding people who need glasses, but we're finding people who need cataracts. So we're able to increase their cataract patient volume as well. So about 80% of our hubs are now embedded in eye hospitals. So that's one model. The second model is we call our partnership model. So there's other organizations that already have nice distribution platforms and infrastructure. And we go to those organizations and we tell them about the power of this product and we teach them how to incorporate our eyeglasses into their distribution channel. And that's sort of a wholesale partnership channel.
Do you think large, what I call manufacturer of glasses or large branded companies, they would see you as competition, or they would see you as a collaborator, or they would see you as somebody who's actually going to help them as well resolve problem at the bottom of the pyramid?
Well, I guess the question is how they see us versus how I see us. And so in terms of how they see us, I think they, at least early on, they didn't pay attention to us. They just thought we were a small NGO doing not much work. We've started to get some attention, and a lot of the big companies are watching what we're doing as an innovative way to tap into a whole new market. There are 4 billion people on the planet who earn less than $4 a day. And the whole optical market is geared to the 3 billion people who earn more than that. In fact, really the 1 or 2 billion who earn a lot more than that. So the whole industry is skewed in the fashion direction, in the high margin, low volume, high margin direction, branded glasses and so forth. And no one's paying attention to the 4 billion people who earn less than $4 a day. But meanwhile, those consumers need to read their newspapers, need to see their cell phones, need to read their spiritual texts, and they have a huge need for our glasses, particularly as literacy rates go up. So we think that they're going to increasingly pay attention to us because the top of the market is getting pretty saturated. And in order for companies to get growth, particularly hyper growth, they're going to need to start paying attention to those 4 billion people. And we will have a lot of market intelligence on those markets by the time they get there. And I think then we can really become partners in this work. But at this point, they don't really see us as partners.
Why do you think that thinking stays with them? Because I'm a little surprised if they don't take you as partners. Because you're resolving a problem in the world, which is probably one of the most, not really being looked at as a problem. You're not even thinking that it is actually a problem.
Right.
And so if you really look at it, these guys could actually come across to you and say, okay, now let's distribute the product together. Let's penetrate the market. Let's really see that hockey stick growth happen. Mm-hmm. And of course, there is that replacement demand that comes with the product. Mm-hmm. So why do you think they could actually be taking a back step maybe? Or they're not really approaching you with, in a very quicker way, that let's do something together?
I think a lot of it has to do with just the historical mindset of those companies. They're very much luxury good companies, the ones who own the market, if you will, control the brands like Gucci and Prada and Armani and Donna Karan, wherever you may go. And so it's sort of the question of, if you can make $10 on one person, then why would you want to make $1 on 10 people? It's easier for me to just make $10 on one person. But the problem with that philosophy, I believe, moving forward, is that it's going to be harder for you to get that $10 share of that, that customer. That's not a growing customer. What's a growing customer and where you can really make a huge margin is getting 10 people to give you $1. And so I think over time they're going to come to that realization. But right now the whole mindset of those organizations with their low volume, high margin approach is not slated to reaching the BOP. It's not about radical affordability. It's not about solving a social problem. It's really more about brand and fashion and providing a different segment of the market. So it's an interesting area of division, but I do think that over time, what VisionSpring sees our role being is to demonstrate to those companies that there is a vibrant market and that there are economically viable business models that can scale through market forces. And by demonstrating that to those big companies, hopefully we'll attract them to this market.
Can I safely say that organizations like yours are really redefining the very idea of capitalistic systems or way the markets need to actually run. And that is really going to cause concern for people? Or do you think that's going to be the new way that the capitalistic structure is actually going to be looked at in the future?
I think it's the new way the capitalistic structure is going to work. I think it's untenable where 85 of the richest people in the world have the same wealth as half of the human family. And a capitalistic structure that supports that kind of disparity is not a sustainable one. We need to figure out new ways and to tap into this wonderful thing we call capitalism, but to do it in a way that brings a larger proportion of the human family into the benefit of the power of capitalism. So I believe that this is a new brand of capitalism. We might call it social entrepreneurship, but you can also call it empathetic capitalism or compassionate capitalism, because that's also what it is.
But don't you think a lot of people would actually say that there's a person who's very naive when he's actually thinking like this, and he's trying to dismantle some existing structures, and he's actually a nut?
I've been called worse, and so I think there is a lot of mainstream thinking who don't believe in that message. But I think there'll always be luxury manufacturers and people who are able to attract those kinds of margins. But over time, what's going to become clear is that a larger portion of the human family are going to want the goods and services that the smaller portion already has. And in order for the society to grow and the income disparity to shrink, we need new forms of capitalism. And it's not only a matter of business savvy, it's also a matter of social equity. And I might even say national security. Because if the income disparity continues to be so significant, that over time undermines the security of countries and society in general. So I think this form of capitalism is in fact peace building in many ways.
So is it that I'm actually seeing, or the ideas that you're saying, are just about from a human who's very who wants to help people? Or is it that there is a model that you're talking about which is replicable?
I think it's both. It's sort of the blending of the heart and mind. I think, the old form of capitalism with Milton Friedman, where he said it's all about maximizing profits, didn't really take into consideration the whole human being and the complexity of who we are as beings. Because we have both aspects to us. We want to strive to be our best. We want the best for ourselves and our family. We want security. We want to maximize profit. But also there's a deep yearning within us to also have a life of significance and to ask ourselves, what is the meaning of life? What does it mean to flourish in your life? And I think those yearnings are as important, if not more, than the profit imperatives. And I'm seeing a huge shift in even the best business schools in America. Increasingly, the social enterprise clubs are oversubscribed. People want this form of capitalism to flourish.
When you talk about enterprises like this, or creating a social enterprise, what are those three things that you will really have to keep in mind before you actually make a deep dive or a plunge into this area?
The first is that probably the most important thing you need is grit and perseverance. It's going to be harder and take longer than you think it's going to take. And so for those people who get into this field, don't do it unless there is a deep drive in your heart to pursue your idea, because it's going to be the heart that will act as the motor of action that can be sustained over many years and even decades. So the first is grit and perseverance, and melding the heart with action, because that's where that grit and perseverance comes from. The second is you have to think of your social enterprise as a business. Unless you can make a model actually work and go round economically, it might be a small is beautiful kind of project, but it will never come close to solving the problem that you're trying to solve. Unless you can tap into those market forces, you won't be able to scale your idea. So that's a second area. And the third, it's like so many businesses, it's all about the money and the people. You need money and people, and so you have to figure out where is the money going to come from, and what kind of people are you going to attract to the organization to bring your idea into reality.
And if I say that these are some very powerful 3 learnings, do you think they're going to be applicable to large enterprises as well? In terms of like how they really have to solve problems in the future, look at the markets in the future?
I do. I think the large enterprises are going to have an increasingly hard time resting on their laurels. One thing is for sure, is that the pace of change is only getting faster and faster. And so the companies that rest on their laurels and don't think about innovation and don't think about new markets are going to probably go the way of the dinosaur.
Mm-hmm. And how do I actually say that, what is Jordon Kassalow today? Is he an entrepreneur? Is he a doctor? Is he a social entrepreneur? Or is he a business thinker? What is he?
I'd like to think of myself as all of those things, but I think first and foremost is I saw an inequity. I saw a problem that needed to be solved, that was simple, that was impactful, that was big, and I just wanted to see the world a different way. The world was one way, and I envisioned the world the other way. The good news about having vision, if you will, is that you can see a different future. The bad thing about having that vision is that your vision always works a lot faster than reality. And so I've spent the last 10 years trying to catch up to my vision, and I think I'm going to spend the next 30. But my belief is that by the time we're finished with this and my life is through, we'll have made a major dent in this issue, and that kids won't be falling out of school because they can't see. Adults won't be falling out of the workplace because they can't see. People won't be unsafe on the road because they can't see. And that's the kind of world I want to be part of.
And anything else that you would like to share?
Just that for me, this is a sort of this experience of being back in India. I started my work in India 25 years ago at the Aravind Eye Hospital, and just to be back here 25 years later is quite a privilege and an honor, and it's an honor to share the stage with you today, and I appreciate your attention to this issue, and thank you for the opportunity to tell your audience a little bit about VisionSpring and our work.
Thank you, Jordon. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for joining us at the Thinkers 50 Business World Interaction today. Thank you.
Thank you.